There is a number on your pay stub. It arrives on a schedule. It is taxed before you see it. It is documented, verifiable, and completely visible to anyone who asks. Your employer knows it. The IRS knows it. Your landlord ran it through a calculator before you signed the lease. And then there is another number. It does not appear on a pay stub. It does not have a direct deposit confirmation. It does not get announced in a meeting or celebrated with a small cake in the break room. Most people in your life have no idea it exists. That is not an accident. That is the design. This is the story of what happens when those two numbers live in the same person, and why the gap between them tends to grow in one direction over time. When we say businesses nobody knows you own, we do not mean anything hidden in the legal sense. We do not mean offshore accounts or shell companies or anything that requires a lawyer to explain twice. We mean something simpler and more common than people realize. Asset ownership. You build or acquire a business. You structure it properly. You hire or contract the people who run the daily operations. You step back. The business generates revenue. A portion of that revenue flows to you as the owner. Your coworkers do not know. Your neighbors do not know. The person who cuts your hair does not know. Not because you're concealing anything, but because it simply never comes up, and you have no particular reason to bring it up. That invisibility is actually useful. There is less ego attached to it. You do not need the business to make you feel successful in front of other people, so you make cleaner decisions about it. You reinvest when you should reinvest. You delegate when you should delegate. You do not hold on to control for the sake of feeling important. The businesses that grow quietly tend to do so because the owner removed themselves from the center of it early enough to let the structure do the work. That is not a personality quirk. It is a strategy. Now look at the math, because the numbers need to be honest here, or none of this means anything. $90,000 a month in revenue is not $90,000 a month in income. That sentence matters. A business doing $90,000 in monthly revenue might operate at a 30 to 40% net margin after expenses, payroll, platform costs, fulfillment, software, and taxes. That means the owner takes home somewhere between $27,000 and $36,000 a month. Still a significant number. Still more than most annual salaries compressed into a single month. But revenue is not the same as profit, and profit is not the same as what lands in your account after obligations are settled. The person who tells you they make $90,000 a month without clarifying the structure is leaving out the most important part of the sentence. A realistic version of this model looks something like the following. Multiple income-producing assets, not one. Perhaps 2 or 3 businesses operating in different verticals. Each one doing $20,000 to $35,000 a month in revenue. Each one running at margins that reflect the actual cost of operating at that scale. One might be a service business with a small contracted team. One might be a content-driven acquisition model. One might be a product business with fulfillment handled by a third party. Together, they produce the number. Separately, each one is manageable. The owner's direct time involvement across all 3 might be 15 to 25 hours a week once the systems are built. That last clause is doing significant work. Once the systems are built. This model fits a specific type of person, and it does not fit everyone, which is something most people selling courses about passive income will never say directly. It fits people who are comfortable with delayed feedback. You will work for months before the revenue becomes consistent. It fits people who can hold uncertainty without it becoming paralysis. The early stages of any business involve more questions than answers, and the temperament required to keep moving through that is not universal. It fits people with a genuine tolerance for responsibility, because when something breaks, and something always breaks, there is no manager to escalate to. There is only you and the decision in front of you. It does not fit people who need a guaranteed outcome before they begin. It does not fit people who conflate busyness with productivity and cannot separate the two. It does not fit people who are not willing to learn a domain deeply enough to make good decisions inside it, even if they eventually delegate the execution. The trade-offs are real and they deserve to be stated plainly. Recognition is slower. Nobody is going to promote you or give you a performance review that tells you are on track. The feedback loops are financial and sometimes months long. The responsibility is higher than employment in a way that does not fully register until something goes wrong and you understand that the resolution is entirely yours to manage. The upfront learning curve is front-loaded and steep. The first business you attempt will teach you more through failure than through success, and you have to be willing to pay that tuition in time, money, and the particular discomfort of not knowing what you do not know yet. The timeline that most people imagine when they hear a number like $90,000 a month is compressed. The timeline that actually produces that number is not. Most people who reach that level of owner income did not do so in a year. They did so in 4 to 7 years of consistent effort, iteration, and reinvestment. They made decisions that did not pay off immediately. They built infrastructure before it felt necessary. They hired before they were fully certain they could afford to. And at some point, the machine became large enough that the output exceeded what the job ever would have produced alone. That is the gap this script is about, not the gap between people who work hard and people who do not. Not the gap between people who are lucky and people who are not. The gap between a fixed income that scales only as fast as someone above you decides it should, and an ownership structure that scales with the quality of the decisions you made 2 years ago. The job stays visible, the business stays quiet, and the distance between those two numbers is the subject of everything that follows. Not all businesses require a stage. Some of them require a spreadsheet, a service agreement, and a phone that rings on a schedule because the demand that feeds them does not stop. Not because someone went viral, not because a founder appeared on a podcast. Because the problem the business solves existed before the business did, and it will exist after. These are the ones worth understanding. The traits that define a quietly profitable business are not glamorous. Repeat demand. The customer has the problem again next month. Not because you convince them to come back, but because the underlying need recurs on its own schedule. Lawns grow back, grease traps fill, HVAC filters clog. Payroll needs to be processed. Pest control needs to be renewed. The business does not manufacture urgency. The urgency was already there. Simple fulfillment. The delivery of the service or product does not require extraordinary talent at every level. It requires a trained person following a documented process. That distinction matters enormously once you're thinking about scale, because extraordinary talent is scarce and expensive and difficult to replicate. A documented process can be taught, monitored, and repeated by people who are competent and well compensated but not irreplaceable. Low churn. The customer who arrived last quarter is still there this quarter. They did not need to be convinced again. The relationship has inertia. B2B service contracts behave this way. Subscription products behave this way. Monthly maintenance agreements behave this way. Churn is the silent killer of cash flow businesses, and low churn is the silent multiplier. The categories that consistently produce this profile are not obscure. Local service businesses, commercial cleaning, landscaping, pest control, junk removal, gutter maintenance, pool service. B2B maintenance and support, IT managed services for small businesses, bookkeeping firms, compliance adjacent services, facilities management. Niche e-commerce with consumable products, specialty supplements, branded supplies for a specific trade, replacement components for equipment people already own. Digital utilities, software tools that solve one specific workflow problem for a specific industry, directories people pay to be listed in, membership platforms organized around access rather than entertainment. None of these are new ideas. That is the point. New ideas carry novelty risk. Proven categories carry execution risk, which is a risk you can manage by being competent and consistent. Here is how you evaluate any opportunity before committing to it. 4 questions in order. First, is the demand real and recurring without you manufacturing it? If you have to convince someone they have a problem, your acquisition cost just became permanent. Second, how concentrated is the competition, and does it compete on price or on relationship? A market full of low-effort operators competing on price is actually an opportunity, because a slightly better operator with basic systems can take margin they left on the table. A market dominated by entrenched relationships requires a different entry. Third, do customers accept price increases without leaving? That is pricing power. It tells you whether the business is providing something people can substitute easily or something they depend on. Fourth, how much operational complexity lives at the owner level versus the worker level? If the business cannot function for 2 weeks without your specific judgment, you have not built a business yet. You have built a job that follows you home. Score each category 1 to 3. Any opportunity below an 8 deserves a harder look before you commit. On customer acquisition. You do not need a personal brand to fill a service business. Local SEO captures people searching for what you provide the moment they need it. Review velocity on Google and Yelp compounds over time and becomes an asset that generates inbound without ongoing spend. Referral programs structured into the service agreement, a small credit, a simple ask at the 60-day mark, produce customers who arrive pre-trusting. Partnerships with adjacent businesses, a plumber who refers your water damage restoration, a real estate agent who refers your cleaning service, a payroll company that refers your HR compliance tool, create distribution that requires relationship management rather than advertising budget. Marketplaces like Thumbtack, Angie, and platform-specific directories provide immediate lead access in exchange for margin. You use them to generate early cash flow and reduce dependence on them over time as own channels mature. The unit economics are the foundation, and they deserve to be understood precisely. Price minus variable costs equals contribution margin. Variable costs include labor, materials, platform fees, and anything that scales directly with each job delivered. Contribution margin is what remains to cover fixed costs and eventually become profit. Payback period is how long it takes to recover your customer acquisition cost from the margin that customer generates. If you spend $80 to acquire a customer and they generate $40 of contribution margin per month, your payback is 2 months. If they stay for 2 years, that relationship generated $920 net of acquisition cost. That is the arithmetic of a quiet business operating correctly. There are 3 paths into this model. You build from scratch. Lower capital requirement, longer timeline to consistent revenue, higher learning curve at the beginning. You buy an existing small business, establish cash flow, existing customer base, faster to owner income, higher entry capital required, risk that the previous owner was the primary reason customers stayed. Or you partner with an operator, someone who runs the day-to-day in exchange for equity or compensation, while you provide capital, systems, and strategic direction. Each path carries different risk profiles and different time requirements from you personally. What makes something scalable rather than busy work is not size. It is structure. A business that runs on your memory and your relationships and your availability is not a system. It is a dependency. Scalable means the process is documented. Decisions below a certain threshold are made by someone other than you. Quality is measured against a standard that exists in writing. New people can be trained from materials rather than from watching you specifically. That last part is where most small businesses stall. The owner gets good at the work. They never get good at removing themselves from the work. The business grows to the edges of their personal capacity, and then it stops. The ones that print quietly beyond that point made a different choice earlier. They built the structure before it felt necessary. They hired before it felt comfortable, and then they stepped back far enough to let the machine run. You have a day job. It starts at a fixed time, it ends at a variable time. It takes more from you on some weeks than others, and it does not ask permission before doing that. The business exists in the space that remains. This is not a limitation to overcome. It is a design constraint, and design constraints, when you work with them instead of against them, produce better systems than unlimited time ever would. You do not have the option of being present for everything. So you build things that do not require your presence. Start with the week. Map the actual hours, not the aspirational ones. Where are the reliable blocks? Early morning before the commute. A lunch window, 2 hours on Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Saturday morning before the rest of the house wakes up. These are not large amounts of time. Combined, they might total 12 to 15 hours. That is enough if you protect them and use them in the right sequence. Strategy and decision-making in the clearest windows. Communication and approvals in the middle ones. Review and financial monitoring can happen in 10 minutes on a phone before dinner. The week has a shape. You learn its shape and you build around it. Priorities follow a simple rule. Anything that blocks revenue gets handled first. A vendor invoice holding up a client deliverable. A contract waiting for a signature. A hiring decision that leaves a role unfilled while work accumulates. Everything else has a cadence. Weekly review, monthly financial close, quarterly planning. You do not mix levels. You do not spend a Tuesday morning doing what belongs in a monthly review. The categories stay separate because if they blur, the urgent always defeats the important, and the important is the only thing that builds anything. Bottlenecks are always either a decision, a person, or a process. When something slows down, you identify which one it is before you try to fix it. A decision bottleneck means something is waiting on you specifically. You either make the decision or you document the rule that allows someone else to make it. A person bottleneck means a role is under-resourced or unclear. A process bottleneck means the steps are not written down and everyone is improvising. All 3 are solvable. None of them are solved by working harder in the same pattern. The standard operating procedure is the most undervalued document in a small business. It is not glamorous. It does not require software. It requires that someone, usually you at first, writes down exactly how a recurring task gets done. Not approximately, exactly. What triggers it, what information is needed, what the steps are in order, what done looks like, what to do if something goes wrong. A 1-page document that answers those questions for each core process is the first layer of the machine. The second layer is a delegation ladder. Not everything requires the same level of judgment. Some decisions belong to you, some belong to a manager or lead contractor. Some belong to a frontline worker following documented steps. The ladder maps that clearly. The business runs as far down the ladder as the ladder reaches. You build the ladder longer over time, on hiring and vendors. The first role you fill is not the one that does the most work. It is the one whose absence creates the most bottleneck. Usually that is a coordinator or operations lead, someone who receives information, moves tasks forward, and communicates with customers when you are not available. Not a technician, a person who holds the system together while the technicians do the work. You pay this role well because it is the load-bearing wall. The incentive structure matters. People perform toward what they are measured on. If you measure speed, you get speed and you lose quality. If you measure customer retention, you get relationship management. Align the measurement with the outcome you actually want and make the metric visible. Accountability is not punishment. It is clarity about what is expected and feedback about whether it happened. Quality control is a sample, not a surveillance system. You review a percentage of outputs. You document what you find. You adjust the process, not just the person. The financial architecture of a quiet business has a few non-negotiable elements. Separate accounts. Business revenue does not touch your personal accounts until you pay yourself deliberately. One operating account, one reserve account, one owner draw account. 3 accounts, 3 jobs. Bookkeeping happens on a fixed cadence, weekly for categorization, monthly for reconciliation, quarterly for review against targets. You do not wait until the end of the year to understand what happened. The cash reserve is 3 months of fixed operating expenses held separately. Not invested, not deployed, held. A simple dashboard, a single page you can read in 4 minutes, shows revenue versus prior period, margin by service line, accounts receivable aging, and reserve balance. You look at it weekly. You take one action from it. Legal and ethical clarity is not a footnote. Contracts are written plainly. The customer understands what they are paying for, what recourse they have, and what happens if something goes wrong. You pay taxes on the income. You do not structure arrangements to obscure ownership in ways that cross legal lines or mislead customers. The quiet and quietly profitable does not mean hidden in ways that create liability. It means unannounced. You do not need to market your ownership. You do need to comply with every jurisdiction that applies. The distinction is important enough to repeat. Risk management is where most small business owners spend the least time until they wish they had spent more. Concentration risk means a single customer representing more than 20% of revenue. You notice when a customer approaches that threshold and you acquire new customers with specific intent to dilute it. Platform risk means your distribution depends on a marketplace or a platform whose terms you do not control. You reduce it by building own channels in parallel. Customer churn is tracked monthly. You know your number and you have a retention protocol. Insurance is not optional. General liability at minimum. Professional liability if you provide any advisory or service that could produce a client claim. A contingency plan exists in a document somewhere. If the operations lead leaves without notice, here is what happens in week 1, week 2, and week 3. Reinvestment versus profit is a decision made on a schedule, not in the moment. Growth capital expenditure happens when the constraint on more revenue is capacity, not demand. If demand exceeds your ability to deliver, you invest in delivery. If your delivery exceeds your current demand, you invest in acquisition. Owner pay is not what is left over. It is a line item. It is paid on a schedule. The remainder, after reserves, after reinvestment, after owner draw, is available for portfolio diversification. You move it out of the business and into assets that are not correlated with the business. The machine runs. Not perfectly, not without friction. But it runs when you are in a meeting. It runs when you are on vacation. It runs on the Tuesday that turns difficult. You built it so it would. The machine runs, and then you build another one. Not immediately. Not before the first one is stable. Not before you have a month where you close the books and the number on the right side is larger than the number on the left and you do not feel surprised by that. The surprise leaving is the signal. It means the system is doing what systems do. It means you are ready for the next one. This is the portfolio approach. Not one business that becomes enormous. Several businesses that become reliable. Each one small enough to be managed without your constant presence. Each one generating a cash flow stream that does not depend on the others. If one slows, the others continue. If one grows faster than expected, you reinvest the surplus without touching the others. The fragility of a single income stream, even a profitable one, is concentration risk by another name. You have already learned what that word means. You diversify for the same reason. The roadmap is 12 to 24 months, not a weekend. Month 1 through 3, pick one model. Not the most exciting one. The most repeatable one. A service with clear inputs, clear outputs, and a customer who understands exactly what they are paying for. You validate it with 10 customers before you declare it working. Not 5, not 2. 10 paying customers who return or refer or both. You price it to cover your costs, your time at an honest hourly rate, and a margin that makes reinvestment possible. Underpricing is not a strategy. It is a postponed failure. You write the process down before you delegate it. You learn the system from the inside before you hand it off. Month 4 through 8, you hire or contract the first role. The one whose absence creates the most bottleneck. You do not do this early. You do it when the process is documented enough that the role has something to follow. The first hire protects your time. That is their job. You measure output, not hours. You run the business from the dashboard, not the inbox. By month 6, you have a profitable month that does not require heroism to produce. That is the milestone, not revenue. Profit that arrived through the system rather than through you. Month 9 through 12, you stabilize. You do not expand yet. You watch the system run for a quarter without major intervention. You run the quarterly review. You find the 2 things that need adjustment and you adjust them. You do not find 20 things. You find 2. If you find 20, the system is not ready for replication. You wait another quarter, month 13 through 24. You replicate. You take the playbook from business 1, the documented processes, the hiring template, the financial architecture, and you apply it to business 2. Different niche, same structure. The learning curve is shorter the second time because the system already exists. You are filling it with new content, not rebuilding the machine from scratch. The milestones you track are not revenue targets. They are behavioral confirmations. First profitable month, first hire who operates without daily instruction. First 10 customers who found you without you finding them. First systemized handoff where a task moved from your calendar to someone else's and the outcome did not degrade. These are the real metrics. They tell you whether you have a business or whether you have a job you created for yourself and forgot to pay yourself overtime. The failure points are predictable. Overexpansion before stabilization. You launch 3 things before 1 is profitable and all 3 suffer from the division of attention. Underpricing because you are afraid the customer will say no. They will sometimes say no. The ones who say yes at the right price are better customers. Ignoring operations because operations are not interesting. They are not interesting. They are also the difference between a business and a very exhausting hobby. Burnout because you treat the quiet hours as optional. They are not optional. They are the job. The day job earns the income. The quiet hours build the portfolio. Both require showing up. Anonymity is sustainable when the brand carries the visibility and you do not. Your business has a name that is not your name. It has a presence that is not your face. The customer relationship belongs to the entity. The reviews mention the company. The referrals go to the brand. You are the architect. The building does not need your name on the door to stand. This is not concealment. It is structure. You comply with every legal disclosure requirement in every jurisdiction that applies. The quiet is about marketing, not about obligation. The end game is not a number on a screen that impresses someone at a dinner party. It is a Wednesday afternoon where nothing urgent is waiting for you and nothing falls apart because you are unavailable. It is optionality, the ability to take an opportunity or decline one without either decision threatening everything else. It is resilience, several streams instead of one, several machines instead of one. A life that does not stop when any single part of it does. You make $40,000 at a job that most people know about. You make $90,000 a month from businesses that most people do not. The distance between those 2 numbers was built in the quiet hours. It was built with documented processes and boring models and 10 customers at a time. It was not built in a single transaction. It was not built on a single bet. Pick one model this week. Build one repeatable system. Write down the first process before you go to bed tonight. The Tuesday after you start still comes. It always does. Make sure something is already running when it arrives.